And with that, let's move forward, John. Want to provide just a brief overview of what we are hoping to discuss with everyone this evening. We'll do a quick round of introductions among the project team, and then we will provide a little background on the project and what it is that we are working on and some of the history behind it. We have done some previous research and engagement through surveys with the community that we will provide some results on, and also findings from a traffic study that has been prepared in support of some of the conceptual design work that's been done. But we hope to spend a good chunk of the open house reviewing some alternative concepts and options around a proposed new bridge over the Sunbro River at 6th Street, as well as new right-of-way and street treatments to the roads connecting to the bridge. But we certainly want to provide plenty of opportunity and time to answer questions. So with that, John, I think you can advance the slide. So quick introductions. My name is Jay Dema. I am a senior planner with architecture and planning firm called Perkins and Will. My role in the project is I've been working with the consultant team, and I'm project manager, and in close collaboration with the City of Rochester and the Destination Medical Center, the DMC. If my colleague John could introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is John Slack. I'm a landscape architect, urban designer with Perkins & Will, and I am sort of leading up the design side, so a lot of coordination with all the sub-consultants and working with the city to help sort of facilitate the design side of the process.
Great, thanks, John. And before we get into the meat of the presentation, just some reminders about virtual meetings. Not everyone is as a regular virtual meeting attendee, so let's be patient. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A tab button that you can select and put questions in. We will certainly reserve time at the end to answer any questions, but it looks like we might have the ability here, based on the number of people who are in attendance, that we'll probably pause at a few points throughout the process, and we can answer questions that you've typed in the chat, or perhaps we can even unmute folks and we can actually hear questions as well. So with that, let's move on. Background for the project. Several years ago, the City of Rochester went through a pretty robust process to develop a comprehensive plan for the City of Rochester, looking at a variety of system-wide and city-wide systems that are really sort of integral to the functioning of the city and the city's future. So that's, transportation, stormwater, environmental conditions, housing, land use, a variety of these sort of citywide things. And one of the things that they looked at was areas within the city where there might be opportunities for some redevelopment within the community to help revitalize certain areas or catalyze change in others. And one of the areas that got identified was this area. It's been referred to as the downtown southeast waterfront. So, for the comprehensive plan, that was just pretty much a dot on a map, and said, this is an area that probably requires some further looking into. Once the comprehensive plan got adopted, then the city set out about focusing on some of these recommendations. So, John, if you can flip to the next slide. That ended up resulting in a process to look at this southeast waterfront area, which you can see dashed in yellow here, just southeast of downtown. And it's roughly a 60-acre area. And one of the reasons why they focused on it is that there's a number of variety of uses that really are kind of underutilizing the space that's there. There's a former Kmart There's a former milk production facility, the Ampey facility, for those familiar with it. And then there's also significant parts of the area that are used as surface parking lot for downtown employers, in particular the Mayo Clinic. So that's a lot of different land and space that, being so close to downtown, just made sense to think about how that might sort of change and evolve in the future. That process to create that vision took roughly 9 months, and the city council formally adopted this small area plan back in last spring in April of 2021. And so some some a little bit of background, John, if you could switch to the next slide. So the process of creating that small area plan was guided by a set of principles, both that were included in the comprehensive plan, but also emerged out of the planning process. Because there was a variety of community meetings and stakeholder meetings that went along with the development of the small area plan. So principles around integrating land use and transportation, emphasizing fiscal sustainability in any future investments in the area, the opportunities to expand housing and providing more housing choice, considering the potential impacts of any future development on the adjacent neighborhoods. But then also key issues around just the opportunities to create better connectivity within the community. For those who are familiar with this area, there's not many connections either east-west or north-south through this area. So it's that opportunity through change in new development to be able to make better connections. And there was also a lot of discussion and goals around social equity and environmental justice, and the opportunities to just make a more healthy, wellness-driven environment in this area. The result of this, John, next slide, was by and large a pattern in which envisioned of reintroducing the city's existing grid system into this area, and also introducing a lot of greenery and a lot of again, opportunities around housing and employment. And you can see from this illustrative plan here, there's a lot of green areas identifying small parks and park spaces, but a lot of trees along roadway boulevards, and the potential for innovative stormwater management. And you can notice along the Zumbro River, a lot of greening in that area, and really trying to really reintroduce the community back to the river as an asset. And on the right-hand side are just a number of just illustrative images just based on the vision. None of these were actual development proposals per se, but this was just meant to help sort of visualize what this area could be over the long term. Right, next slide, John. Thank you. The result of that is that there were some of these recommendations as part of the plan, one of which was a bridge over the Zumbro River. So that's really the project that we're discussing here today, are conceptual designs for this new bridge and access improvements to the bridge. But in addition to that, we're looking at a new 6th Street through parts of the small area plan, and then also potential enhancements or improvements to 6th Street in the existing neighborhoods to the east and to the west as well. Looking at traffic calming, traffic mitigation, and again, those recognizing the impacts that development in this area might have on these neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so I think you can go to the next slide, John. That's great, thank you. So the overall process and schedule that we're following in the development of these conceptual designs is we began this process in late August, early September, analyzing conditions, gathering initial input on what the look and feel and function of a new bridge and those access points. And we've been drafting up a variety of different concepts and alternatives, and now we're gathering additional input on that, and we'll be presenting some of those just a little bit to you. Eventually, what we're going to do is refine those to a preferred concept and ultimately finalize that concept And that will by and large complete this current phase of work associated with the bridge and the access to the bridge. However, the future phases that would be anticipated is that with a conceptual design in hand and some basic sense of what the cost of something like this might be, there'll be a process upon which there would be the need to secure a funding and apply for funding for a new investment like this. And then with that in place, then there would be the detailed design, because right now we're just focusing at the conceptual level. And then once you do that detailed design, then there would eventually go through a construction phase. And and it's hard to pinpoint the exact amount of time that those additional future phases would last, but a best estimate might be, somewhere 4 to 5 years from now. Great. And as a reminder, we're doing a lot of talking to a lot of different stakeholder groups, having meetings with the general public, such as this evening, and getting a lot of great input and feedback on the process to help inform these concepts. But at the end of the day, the decision to continue to move forward beyond this phase will be contingent on approval by the Rochester City Council, as well as input from the DMC board. Great. I also want to comment that they're sort of parallel to meetings such as this evening. We have also been working with what is described as a co-design team. This is a small group of local stakeholders who are highly engaged in the design process. We've been meeting with this group roughly every 3 weeks for the last couple months, and we'll continue to have a couple more meetings into the future as well. And this is a group that's been pulled together who by and large represent social and cultural groups that many times aren't traditionally part of a process like this. And so they represent folks from different ages, different genders, different races, different ethnicities and physical abilities. And this is a great way, because then these folks can liaison back to communities that they're part of, and really try to broaden sort of the perspectives and inputs on a process like this that traditionally hasn't normally occurred. So we're we're kind of trying to do a variety of different ways to really engage as many people as we possibly can. Next slide. Yes, and as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we did have been doing an online survey, asking people about some key questions around, the conceptual design of a bridge and how to access the bridge. So that survey was available roughly through most of October. And it was advertised through a variety of channels that the city of Rochester promoted through social media, press releases, and then also our co-design team as liaisons to their communities as well. We had about 240 respondents, in the questions focused on the priority function of a new bridge and desired features and the quality of the roadways leading to it. So let's look at some results. Next slide, please, John.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go. Great.
It wouldn't advance.
So the first question here on the left that we had asked the public was that bridges serve many purposes. So which of the following purposes do you feel is the most important? And we can see here that a little over 50% of those that responded said that allow traffic to flow better would be sort of the most important purpose of a new bridge. And then just behind that was connect neighborhoods to one another. So our kind of big takeaway from the design team is that we understand that most people feel that improving the mobility and access with the bridge is the most important purposes. We also asked folks about which types of transportation should have the highest priority when designing the bridge. And it was, we had asked people whether they felt that motor vehicles should maybe have the priority, whether pedestrians or bicycles should, transit, or we also provided an option where folks could say, hey, I think all types should have perhaps equal priority with the design of the bridge. And our takeaway here is that, based on these results where motor vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles, and all types, about a third selected each of those. And so there's from the general public, there's frankly not a real clear indication of which transportation type should have the highest priority. So, and then we also asked people to review a set of words that would best represent the desired image and character for the bridge. And what we found here was interesting, that roughly 50% of the people picked the words traditional and subdued versus the other options that were listed, which tended to be a little bit more sort of landmark driven. So words like iconic and memorable and monumental and remarkable. And so we found that interesting in that there's a roughly 50-50 split around folks who felt that the bridge should be a major aesthetic landmark versus the bridge perhaps taking more of a supporting role and letting the small area, the downtown waterfront southeast area, really be kind of the thing upon which to sort of focus the interest of future development. And then finally, we asked people about those areas leading to the bridge, which types of public realm or streetscape elements should perhaps be the highest priority along those streets leading to the bridge. And people could select up to 3 choices. And the choice that got the most selections was the separation of modes. People felt that cars, bikes, and pedestrians, if there was a way to be able to make sure that those were safely separated for folks using any one of those means of transportation. But that was, also other high-ranking choices were landscaping and street trees, that idea of bringing greenery in the natural environment. Also accessible pathways and routes, lighting, both from a sort of a safety standpoint, but also a way to create some sort of visual interest through illumination, and in a river overlook. An idea of a river overlook was also selected frequently as well. So, those were the results of the survey work that we had done, and we've been using that information to kind of help inform and guide some of the design elements and features. Next slide, please, John. So with that, I'm going to transfer this over to my colleague, John, and he's going to give you an update on our traffic study and then dive into some of the concepts that we've been doing.
Great, thank you, Jay. So as part of this design process, we've, as Jay showed you on a previous slide, there's a couple of different smaller projects that we are looking at. A lot of the projects really kind of focus in on the lead up to the bridge area, so along 6th Street, southeast and southwest. So a traffic study was prepared to really kind of look at the implications of the regional growth, as well as the DWSE master plan, so the master plan for the area that Jay presented. And so what these traffic studies at a high level start to identify is that traffic volumes will increase. So in and around the area of 6th Street Bridge, so the first bullet, they're projecting about 5,000 to 8,000 vehicles per day. And then west of Broadway, 14,000 to 18,000 vehicles per day. And we'll get into a little bit more detail of what this actually means on the next series of slides. But as part of this, then, we're continuing to look at design alternatives for 6th Street inside the DWSE, as well as east and west of the DWSE, just to understand sort of the implications of the traffic and to come up with recommendations for safety and traffic calming improvements. So this graphic just really shows the extent of the DWSE. So you can see from 4th Street up to 9th Street, and then the location of the new 6th Street bridge. This graphic is one of the analysis graphics that was developed that really kind of started to look at pedestrian and bicycle mobility, really kind of focused in on current sort of travel times, so identified in the dash lines, and then proposed travel times with a bridge. And so in the green solid line, you can see that, say you're coming from 7th Avenue in the middle of Slattery Park, and you want to get over to Soldiers Field or the YMCA, current travel patterns would take you either north to 4th Street or south, and approximately, it would take you 13 minutes approximately to make that trip. Whereas with a future bridge, that trip could be much more faster, in lieu of sort of the roundabout way that you'd have to go. The blue lines represent, say, if you're coming from the DWSE area itself. So as redevelopment happens and you travel along 4th Street Southwest to get to your destination in the Pill Hill neighborhood, without the bridge, you're looking at a travel time about 25 minutes. With the bridge, much faster because of the opportunity to be able to cross over the river and travel down 6th Street. So this graphic is really kind of identifying existing and forecasted traffic volumes. So in the boxes, you'll see some of the major roadways that surround sort of the DWSE redevelopment site. In each box, there's a black, purple, and green number. The black number represents existing traffic volumes as of today. The purple number, so the second number, represents 2045 forecasted traffic volumes without a bridge. And so based on sort of regional growth and the redevelopment of the site, you're starting to see that in certain areas, 6th Street Southeast, that likely by 2045, you can see increased traffic from 3,600 cars to 4,800 cars. On 6th Street Southwest, you'd be looking at traffic increases from current day of 8,600 to about 14,000. The green number at the bottom represents that same forecast for 2045, but with a bridge in place over the Zumbro River along 6th Street. So for 6th Street Southwest, what it does is it increases the projected traffic volumes in 2045 by another 3,500 traffic per day. And then for 6th Street Southeast, it increases a little bit under 3,000 per day. And I think what that is showing is that with the new connection, that likely there will be more traffic, with the caveat that we'll kind of identify here in the next couple of slides. As part of this analysis, we also wanted to show some of the existing traffic volumes on some of the major roadways in and around downtown, just as a comparison. So you can see where the proposed bridge is identified on the graphic here, sort of in the middle. And then 6th Street Southeast, current, again, 3,600, 6th Street Southwest, anywhere from 6,600 to 8,600. So there are a lot of other roadways in close proximity, say Center Street, 11th Avenue, 6th Avenue, Center Street West, that current traffic volumes are in the range, the 5 to, I say, 8 or 9,000 cars per day that are being projected along 6th Street Southeast in the future. And that's really just to give you a reference for what you might experience or might see traffic in the future. Next three graphics really kind of talk about peak traffic operations. So when we say about operations, it's really how traffic flows through the city, how traffic moves. On the legend in the lower left-hand corner, you can see green, yellow is really great traffic operations. Anything that starts to get into orange and red means that there's some challenges with traffic operations, and ultimately the city will need to kind of look at these areas to implement some other strategies to improve traffic operations. So currently, PM traffic, peak hours, you're seeing that 6th Street Southeast is green up to 3rd Avenue. And then as you move out towards 8th and 9th Avenue, it's still green. And then immediately adjacent to Broadway, 6th Street Southwest is generally green and yellow. So traffic operations on a normal day at this current period of time work pretty well. This graphic represents that 2045 PM peak traffic operations without the bridge. So on 6th Street Southeast, you see that it's still projected without the bridge to be green, and then starting to dip into the yellow a little bit, but from an operation standpoint, that's still really good operations. On 6th Street Southwest, west of Broadway, you're starting to see green starting to turn to yellow, and then actually there are some red and oranges starting to appear. I think that's primarily because the increased traffic that's being generated regionally, but then also to some extent traffic that's coming from the DWSE redevelopment plan in 2045, but still not too bad. And city likely at that time frame would start to look at the Broadway Avenue intersection to start to identify some potential improvements. So last slide here, again, 2045 peak PM operations, but this includes a 6th Street bridge. And so what you're seeing with the 6th Street bridge on the 6th Street southwest side, those traffic operations stay about the same as they would without the bridge. So yellow and green and red, pretty almost exactly the same as the last slide. What you see the difference here is that now, because there is the continuation of the grid across the river and then through 6th Street to 3rd Avenue, and then over to east of this area, you're still maintaining yellow levels of traffic operations, which the city considers that still really good functional traffic movement. Some of the considerations that go along with this analysis include emergency response time. So the more direct route from Station 1, which is at the corner of Broadway, results in much shorter response times, which obviously is a good thing when you're thinking about emergency response to the east. As part of this design, Jay mentioned, and I started to talk about the fact that we are looking at 6th Street Southeast and Southwest for some design improvements. As part of that, we want to maintain the street neighborhood character, but we will do this within the capacity of the existing right of way. And so we can talk a little bit about that. Talked a little bit about the last bullet, which is improved bicycle and pedestrian travel times. But another consideration is bullet number 3, which is really about bicycle crossings. As part of any future improvements in the DWSE, there will be a need to kind of look at safety enhancements, not only for bikes and pedestrians, but then the interface with cars. So there's a whole host of different types of improvements that we could be looking at and considering. And then local street access. You can imagine with increased traffic on 6th Street Southeast and Southwest that there will be some additional new challenges to street access, but on 6th Street Southeast, likely you'll probably see some longer delays turning onto 6th Street Southeast from the neighborhoods just because of the increase of traffic. Other things that we wanted to highlight that would benefit sort of the DWSE area as well as the adjacent neighborhood is that a future bridge does open up the opportunity for sort of near-term redevelopment sites. As part of the DWSE approved plan, the AMPI facility was, I think, identified as one of the key catalyst projects early in the redevelopment effort. And so the bridge obviously just sits directly north of the AMPI site and probably would open that up to earlier redevelopment. There's an opportunity to start to introduce neighborhood goods and services as part of redevelopment happening on the site. Kmart was closed, some of those goods and services were likely lost, and the opportunity to open up the redevelopment site early on likely will add some of those additional goods and services. We haven't talked much about some of these other street right-of-ways, but in the approved plan for DWSE, there are quite a few north-south new roads, 1st Ave and 2nd Ave, as well as an east-west road and 8th. These new right-of-ways also will mitigate some of the future traffic as identified in the traffic study. But that's yet to be really clearly identified and studied, but it will help to alleviate some future traffic concerns in the area. As part of the implementation of a bridge, it also opens up the opportunities to improve green space and green infrastructure connections through the neighborhood to the river. And so there's an added value there of bringing people on bikes and peds through those spaces and better connect to the river and over to the edge of downtown. And then, without a bridge or no bridge, it would probably really limit any future redevelopment, especially in the near term, which ultimately would mean that a lot of the existing land uses, so empty buildings, underutilized spaces, large surface parking lots will remain in the foreseeable future. So bridge design. Jay mentioned we have been working with a co-design team specifically on the bridge design. We've met with this group 6 times. The process has really kind of focused in on visioning early on to ideation of bridges and then subsequently to where we're at tonight. So I'll kind of mention different points of the process as we kind of go through these slides here. But we started really with just an open conversation about sort of the implications of a bridge or key considerations. And so there's obviously a lot of functional aspects to a bridge that we need to think about: types of traffic, number of lanes, traffic volumes, width of sidewalks, connections to sort of multi-modes, bike networks, things like that. There's obviously hydraulics. We've heard from quite a few people as part of our community engagement that we need to be mindful of, the river and the floodplain and future flooding. And so hydraulics will play an important role in that. We've actually talked a lot about placemaking, architecture, and design with the co-design team. So what does that look like? Different architectural elements, overlooks, what does it look like below the bridge? What does the experience feel like walking across the bridge or under the bridge? So those are all kind of things that we'll highlight to some extent. More on the structural side, so the bridge form, are there piers in the river? Are there multiple bridges? What's the construction technology? And then a lot of constraints. As the bridge design moves forward after this conceptual phase, these constraints become key drivers in what ultimately the bridge looks like. But what happens at Broadway? There's some grade separation there. How do you interface with the existing roadway network? There's a railroad crossing on the east side. What happens there because its own railroad right-of-way owns that area. We have the walls along the edge of the river. What happens to those walls in the future? Budget's a really important consideration. Flood capacity. If we make recommendations to widen, the flood mitigation measures, what happens there? And then environmental analysis and approval and permitting are sort of key things that we have to be mindful of now, but become much more relevant the further the design moves forward. So through all of these engagement efforts, including the conversations we'll have tonight, we wanted to start to just really compile all the key themes. I think through the Polco study, you started to see some of the key themes coming out, but this is sort of our running list of kind of the things that we've heard. And there's a lot of alignment between what we've heard from the broader community and from our co-design team. So we've heard a lot about art, the opportunity to integrate art into the design of the space. It could be in the form of something more interpretive. So history of the neighborhood, history of the river, history of the city, or it could be something that, is built into the infrastructure or some other type of art. We've heard a lot about safety, so lighting and lights, not only for safety, but also to create atmosphere. We've heard about accessibility, so ADA access to the bridge, but then also to the river, so down to the edge of the river, and then leading up to the bridge, on 6th Street Southeast and Southwest, as well as Broadway, making sure that that is accessible as well. We've heard a lot about nature, the opportunity for residents of the community to access the water, access the river, and view the natural elements. We heard about sustainability. And then one of the key things is the all modes. I think that started to come out from the summary that Jay gave in the Polco study, but all modes will be important on this bridge, but there is really a desire to prioritize bikes and pedestrians. And also we'll try to show you how we've sort of created that within the design concepts. We heard about safety, concerned about traffic. I think that's one of the biggest things that we've heard from the community is with the increase of traffic generated not only by regional growth, but also by the DWSE area. How does this impact the neighborhoods? What do we do to separate the modes so that we create safe environments for people to cross streets and for bikes to ride? What do we do about noise pollution? And are there additional things to think about as it relates to traffic calming? And then last but not least, we've heard a lot of people say that, this could be a destination. We want it to be welcoming. It could support programming and activation. So what we did as part of this design process is we took all of these key themes and we tried to build a bridge through these series of graphics that I'll show you. So we see these as sort of the bridge components or the kit parts. So how do we actually build a bridge with all of the kind of key themes that we heard? So all modes is the first one. Prioritizing bikes and pedestrians. So on the left, you see a vehicle traffic lanes. Providing access for vehicles, but really trying to minimize the lane widths and the access along the roadway for the vehicles. Heard about pedestrian sidewalks, so separating bikes, peds, and vehicles, but also trying to maximize the amount of space that peds have. And then we heard about separating bike travel lanes. So mostly we've heard about grade separation. So don't have the bikes at the same level as the roadway. We heard a lot about overlooks and gatherings. I think Jay pointed that out in the Polco study. People are interested in the opportunities for gathering programming, activation, but you could also see the need to be able to just kind of sit down, look down at the river, and sort of immerse yourself in nature. We heard a lot about Riverfront Access. So the first image on the left represents ADA access to the edge of the river on both sides of the river. Currently, there is a little bit of access on the east side of the river. It's not ADA accessible, it's actually a maintenance wrap, but the opportunity to get people down adjacent to and next to the river. And then the image on the right represents another way or a different way for people to get down from the bridge deck itself to the ramp and the edge of the river, which would be some sort of formal stairway. We heard a lot about landscaping. So landscaping obviously provides multiple functions from a sustainability standpoint, increasing tree canopy, adding nature, beautification, habitat on the bridge deck, but then also serving a role to sort of help clean the air, provide some protection from vehicles and some separation, and then really trying to bring the natural parts of the river up onto the bridge deck. From a safety standpoint, we talked about accessible routes, talked about lighting, and then also improved crossings. And then the last two, the first one is programming activation. I think we've mentioned this a couple times already, but whether you have opportunity to create a destination here, how can you design a bridge to allow for functional space, programmable space, and flexible space to hold events. And then the last one is traffic calming. So thinking about physically what we can do to provide separation, provide narrow lanes, and even diverters. So what you're seeing here is sort of a culmination of the co-design team process. I think it was 3 co-design team meetings ago. We presented sort of the full range of design options for a bridge. So that's what you're seeing here, 1 through 10. We spent a whole separate meeting, so meeting number 4, just really kind of talking about the design intent behind each of these bridges and how it relates to the feedback that we've received from the co-design team as well as the community, and then ultimately how did it respond to sort of the driving goals that the co-design team set up for the process. So that led to sort of a prioritization of 5 of these bridge options, which is denoted in sort of the orange circle. And then ultimately what we've done since then, after our co-design team meeting number 6, is that we've integrated what we've heard from the broader community through our POLCO survey and other conversations, focus group conversations we've had. We've met with the steering committee, which was the group that actually led the DWSE process. We've had technical conversations with city staff, and that has led us to sort of distill that down even a little bit more to sort of the 4 bridge options that are identified in the orange and blue circle. And what I'm going to present next is really sort of the next level of refinement in that conceptual design. So we're changing the nomenclature. We're going away from those 10 bridges to 3 options labeled A, B, and C. Option A is probably what we would consider sort of a baseline bridge. As you can see in this option, we have east-west travel lanes, narrower travel lanes that support basically all the vehicles necessary. We have grade separated bicycle lanes, so they're up on the pedestrian public realm area. You have the striping and separation from vehicles and pedestrians. We're showing a landscaped area that is likely needs to be raised to be able to support trees and other landscape materials. We're showing lighting in this area. We're showing a much wider expanded sidewalk area with an overlook, and you can see that exists on both sides of the bridge. We have connections that start to tie into the existing public realm along Broadway. We have improvements with crosswalks and some traffic diverters. And then this plan is also showing access to the river, ADA access to the river. What you're seeing here on the east side is that it comes down and you're able to get to the edge of the river on both sides. And then on the west side, closest to Broadway, the main access to the river will be just north of the bridge, just off of the screen here. And then we're also showing a stair access on the east side of the bridge, on the north side. And this stair access actually could work well on either side of the bridge, north and south on the east side. And likely not on the west side, just because there isn't a ton of room from the edge of the wall down to the river. And so this is sort of the first baseline concept. Second concept, what we did was we heard a lot about the opportunity to expand and widen the bridge deck itself to provide more flexibility for programming activation and gatherings and movement. And so what this bridge shows is that there will likely be a really simple sidewalk. Maybe it's only 6-7 feet on the south side. On the north side, you basically create a much larger promenade. There's area for another large landscaped area, could have built-in seating. The bicycle lane, both east and westbound, could fill part of the space and be defined by special paving and signage. And then the rest of the space could be occupied by pedestrians moving back and forth. And so in this space, you could start to imagine that there could be activations, there could be small pop-up events, farmers market, those kind of things. The other elements of this concept are similar to the previous concept. So improved crosswalks, improved connections for bikes from the east to the west on Broadway. You have the ADA accessible ramps on both sides of the river. You have potentially stairs on either the north or south side of the bridge, depending, and opportunity to integrate things like art and lighting. The third option is probably the option that at least to this point, seems like it's garnered a lot of support from the community and the co-design team. We've always kind of referred to this option as a land bridge. Essentially, what this option is just a much wider bridge deck. So what you're seeing here in this option is that there is an east-west bound traffic, but in this case, instead of being very straight like the last two options, we're looking to add a little bit of curvature through this roadway section. The curvature helps in a lot of different ways, especially with slowing traffic and providing some traffic mitigation. So it creates a pretty unique experience into the DWSE as you cross over. From there, you're basically, in these designs, you're creating a much more green space. It's almost like park space on both sides of the bridge. We're showing separated bike circulation in sort of this white pavement that connects you across the bridge. We're showing much wider pedestrian areas in this sort of hatched pavement areas, and then a lot more greening. This could include, some green landforms, a lot of landscaping, as well as overstory trees. And then, as similar to the last two concepts, lighting, public art, improved crossings, improved connections for bikes and peds to cross over Broadway. We have the ADA accessible ramps on both the east and west sides of the river. We have potentially stair connections on the north and south sides on the east side of the river. And so in theory, what we've noticed is that we've gone from 10 very diverse concepts to 3 concepts that are actually starting to look pretty similar and starting to reflect, we think, what we're really hearing from the co-design team and the community is that maybe wider and bigger is better. The opportunity to create that separation, the opportunity to add more landscaping, the opportunity to create a functional space on this bridge is really what we've heard. Should we stop at this point, Jay, and take some questions?
Yeah, I would definitely say this is a good point to do that. So, as mentioned before, you can certainly type something into the Q&A, or if you want to raise your hand, click the little button. It's the raised hand. We can certainly unmute folks, and if you've got a question you want to share verbally, you can happily do that. Well, if a good question hasn't quite popped into your mind yet, that's certainly okay. We can always kind of keep moving forward with a couple other smaller sections of concepts to talk to you about. But if anything were to come up, again, raise your hand or type a question. Oh, we got a question that just came up. Great, thank you. So yes, John, Patrick says, what are the cost differences in the 3 options?
Really great question. At this point, we have as part of the co-design team process, we wanted flexibility in the process, and we wanted to limit early constraints on sort of the design thinking. So we just have really, really high estimates. Estimates that at this point probably aren't completely accurate, but I can say that the three options will increase in cost from A to C. A is most closely aligned with, sorry, I'm trying to go back. A is most closely aligned to maybe much more traditional bridge. You know, if you think about the Bear Creek Bridge that's down at 9th, crossing over Bear Creek, that's a bridge that has some of these same amenities. It's a narrow street bridge. It actually has a center landscape median, has some raised planters on the deck. This bridge is much bigger, a little bit more expansive. So at this point, we haven't refined cost. We're just getting to the point of taking input and then advancing the conceptual designs and understanding sort of the structural design elements of these bridges, which will really inform the cost moving forward. But I think by the time we have our next set of community meetings, we'll have a better sense of what those costs are.
Any other questions? Well, okay. Well, John, let's move forward. And obviously, if there's more that pops up, we can certainly take the time to answer those.
Great, thank you. So another key thing that we have been looking at as it relates to this project is Riverfront Access. I mentioned this, you know, in passing, I think in each of the three concepts, but what this graphic does is it starts to give you a better sense of what that looks like. So for orientation, 6th Street Southwest here, here's the proposed bridge deck in yellow and orange in the middle, and then 6th Street Southeast will occur along this alignment. In the different colors up on the right-hand side, sorry, I have to move this. In purple represents trail that is likely somewhere between 2 and 5%, and then in green is trail that's less than 2%. Some of the key drivers for this design exercise, adding these ADA accessible trails along the edge of the river, we're really focused in on what we would need to do to sort of mitigate impacts to the existing river walls. And so that's directly tied to cost as well. So you can imagine moving more walls would be much more expensive from multiple different points, including more permitting, longer design processes, and a lot more construction. And so what this concept does at its core is really tries to minimize the impacts to the existing wall infrastructure that exists along the river. So you'll also see that there has to be some new retaining walls, but it's fairly minimized to the areas directly adjacent to the bridge. So those are the light blue dash lines. And then more broadly, we kind of looked outside of the core area and to make sure that we were connecting to other sort of amenities, both north and south. And so what this concept does on the west side, where there currently is not any riverfront access, the west side trails on the east side of Broadway, but on the west side of the river, are all up above the existing walls. So what this does is shows that the area to most easily access the river edge is just north of the bridge. So you can see coming off of sort of this little memorial circle area, getting onto the existing riverwalk, and then actually sloping down to a point where you can get on the outside of the wall and then slope back down to the south to a point that's just north of where the existing proposed bridge will be, or the proposed bridge will be. And then that will be essentially at grade, adjacent to the river. And we'll show a cross section what that looks like. That will take you down to the Broadway Avenue Bridge that crosses over the river. And then from there, you'll be able to actually reconnect out to the city grid along First, or you actually can take a trail that has a little bit of slope to it that takes you down to the park. Just real quick, from the standpoint of the pink, you can go steeper and still allow ADA accessibility as part of these designs. But one of the things that we were really kind of looking at in addition to cost and sort of mitigating impact was operations and maintenance. One of the things that the city has issues with is that on a lot of these ADA accessible trails along the river that are steeper, where they have to require a railing, that becomes really problematic during flood seasons and high water events, because you get a lot of debris, trees, things that get caught in there. So what this actually is showing is that we're trying to eliminate a lot of the actual railing along to the river. So it gives you a little bit more visual access, but then it also starts to eliminate some of those operations and maintenance. On the east side, there is currently a trail that does run adjacent to the river, but it's primarily up above. There is a small maintenance access point that exists just around where the proposed bridge will be. It's not ADA accessible. It takes you down a ramp to about this point here. And then from that point, you're basically walking on sandbars and other sort of edges of the river. But what this does to allow for this ADA access building, it brings in a trail network that runs to the south. Down by the Broadway Bridge, there's a series of switchbacks that you would take, basically ramping down, and then this would ramp back up. And then you will essentially touch ground in the river about this point here. And then all the way up to underneath the proposed bridge location would essentially be adjacent to the water's edge. And then from there, the ramp would take you back up and start to tie you back into the existing network. That's what this section is trying to propose or show. So the line at the top is where the proposed bridge location is going to be. Dash lines represent existing walls and contours. And so on the west side, you can see we are basically matching up where the existing wall is, not requiring any wall removal. And then we're adding a 12-foot walk. So 12-foot walk allows the opportunity for two people to be walking side by side and somebody to pass or a bike to move by. So a much more generous walk than maybe normally we would add. On the east side, directly under the bridge, because of the need to gain sort of headway access to get vehicles, emergency vehicles and things under the bridge, there will have to be some wall reconstruction. You can see that the wall is basically in the same spot, but in some cases the wall will have to be enlarged just to allow for that trail access. And on the east side, we're also proposing a 12-foot walk in this area that allows, again, for a lot of circulation. And then there'll be just a subtle slope that takes you down to the edge of the river that likely will be planted. Should we ask questions or should I just move forward?
Well, Karen was kind enough to throw in a comment into the Q&A, and I think I'll just share that in case other folks aren't seeing it. And Karen just mentioned that with the bridge options, the first two options just presented a bit of a challenge around just the proximity of the bike lanes to some of the vehicle traffic. And as a result, she felt that the third option was probably the more safest option because it didn't it's separate, had more separation of the modes.
Yeah, really great comments, Karen. You know, I think as we advance the design, we'll probably take a little bit closer look at some of those elements. You know, I think that there are opportunities to potentially increase the size of the bike lanes. There's some opportunities to maybe actually add some additional barriers, so physical barriers, or even, you know, some other type of barrier that maybe provides a little bit more separation. So those are great comments and things I think that we'll take a look at in more detail. Okay, I'll move on. As I mentioned, one of the last things that we're doing is really looking at 6th Street Southeast and Southwest. For the purpose of the meeting tonight, I can sort of give you an update on some of the current conceptual thinking for 6th Street Southeast. The work on 6th Street Southwest is likely just going to be public realm work, so there's not really going to be the opportunity to change the road configuration, narrow the lanes, or anything like that, just because of really the constraints of the amount of traffic that exists on that roadway. And so that will be likely more aesthetic in nature. But on 6th Street Southeast, I think there's opportunities to look at some really substantial safety improvements, and then long-term, the opportunity to reconstruct the road, possibly. In the design of 6th Street Southeast, some of the key things that we've been looking at is, again, similar to the bridge, type of traffic. Really, the increase in traffic volumes is driving, really the conceptual design that we're looking at. Number of lanes, on-street parking that exists there, not trying to take any of that away. Thinking about the width of future sidewalks, thinking about bike circulation, east and west along 6th Street, thinking about traffic control, crossing safety. I think that's really important along 3rd Avenue, but then also at the school. And then thinking about plantings, there's some existing trees, really nice trees in that area. And so trying to balance all of those considerations as part of the design. So there are 2 options that we're really looking at. One is a short-term option and one is a long-term option. So for the short-term option, we are showing and identifying areas for bump outs. So bump outs are essentially curb extensions that happen at intersections. And what curb extensions do is that they narrow the drive lanes and they create shorter distances for pedestrians to cross. There's also, you can see in the parentheses, there's also some what are called crash modification factors. So these are percentages that we've identified through sort of national best practices that show the different types of improvements related to these different types of kind of safety measures.
Hey, John, we have a hand up from Brian. So, Brian, if you're able to, we can. You should be able to unmute.
Sorry, I must have hit that by accident. I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh, okay.
You're on now, Brian. You have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So I won't talk about these crash modification factors, but you'll see like bump outs have proven to be about 12 improved sort of the auto bike ped crashes by about 12% on average when they look at a whole cross sections of different projects around the country. Other things that we're looking at, high visibility crosswalks. So this probably also incorporates signage to ensure that drivers can see the crosswalk, stop signs, and flashing beacons. And so we're looking at these along 6th Street Southeast, primarily around the school, and then also potentially at 3rd Avenue. 3rd Avenue itself, as part of the traffic study that we're doing now, we're just trying to determine what would it take for a controlled intersection to occur at 3rd Avenue South. What certain amount of redevelopment, a bridge going in, those kind of things will inform what that decision looks like. And so in the short term, as development starts to happen in DWSE and or if with the implementation of bridge, we have quite a few, I think, best practice safety and traffic calming measures that we can implement on 6th Street Southeast to ensure safety and try to slow down traffic along that corridor. We are also looking at a long-term option. We have been told by the city that it's a fairly new roadway, 6th Street Southeast from 3rd Avenue over to 9th Avenue. And so the reconstruction of that could be out 30 plus years. But as part of a long-term concept, we are looking at narrowing street widths. We are looking at adding chicanes. Chicane from a technical standpoint is movement in a road. So I kind of mentioned on option 3 of the bridge, there was some subtle movement, a curvature in the road. That's really what a chicane is. And you can see in the image below what that does. What this does is, again, with narrow lanes, it makes drivers drive slower because there are more impediments in the road. There's more, the road is narrower. There's enclosure in the road. And so it just psychologically makes people drive slower. We can add to that things like, speed bumps, things like that. Those conversations are much further out, but we are trying to define opportunities for long-term improvements if needed. With that, that is sort of a summary of where we're at in the process to this point.
Yeah. So again, certainly, you've pretty much had the chance now to digest everything that was presented, and we're happy to obviously take any questions, whether it's something you want to throw into the Q&A or if you want to share share a question. At the bottom of the page here, you do see a sort of a long link address to go to where on the City of Rochester's website you can find more information about the project and track its progress. But in the Q&A section, Brian was kind enough to actually throw in a link, and you can go in there and you can actually click on that that link itself and go to the city's website if you're so inclined. If you know, obviously, if the moment doesn't strike you to to have a question right now, you can certainly, again, go to the website and hopefully you can get in contact and answer any future questions you might have about the project. If there are no more questions, you know, we want to certainly thank everyone for taking the time out of their schedule to come and hear about the project and provide any insight or input. So we appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.